Welcome back to Level Up. I'm your host Hakeem, and today guest is someone who is redefining what it meant to tell a story in our industry. Neely Khan, founder of the third of AWC, and I'm gonna come to this later to ask about it. He's a storyteller, creative strategist, and one of the most thoughtful voices online when it comes to the intersection of humanity, technology, and brand identity. Through her work, Neely helps hospitality, leisure, and sports brands become the only to tell stories that connect, not just to communicate. Neely, welcome to the show.
Thank you. That is a very generous introduction. I feel like I have a lot to live up to now. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
I'm really excited to have you. There's so much that I'm looking forward to discuss and unpack from your experience. And always, I start my podcast with a little bit, like elevator pitch because I know you quite well, but maybe audience, maybe just a few sentences of who's Nelly and what you do.
That's very kind. Thank you. I'm excited to be here. I feel like we have lots to talk about because kind of had a taste of that in our pre-meeting for this
Yeah.
podcast recording, didn't we?
That's true. That's true. So, yeah, if I want to take it to the early beginning, you're building something really truly unique with a third of AWC. Yeah, I want to ask about what is the stands for actually the AW.
So AWC is the name of my agency. It stands for Art Work Creative, which actually, if I'm completely honest, is not a great name for what we do, but we bought the agency about 2 years ago. And the agency itself has been running for 35 years very successfully. So it already has a very good client base. It's based in Malvern in England. So when we bought the agency, we didn't want to take it away from its legacy. So now we've kind of shortened it to AWC. And I call myself founder the third because since stepping into it, I have almost refounded it. We've repositioned the agency, essentially doing what I'd been doing as a freelancer for many years prior to that, story branding for mostly the hospitality and leisure sector.
Nice, really good to hear. I'm really interested to hear the story. Like, what brought you to that, agency? What kind of, what inspired you? And what actually, I think the most importantly, what gaps are you trying to fill in the industry?
Oh, that's like three very interesting questions in one. So the first part, I am actually not a typical agency leader at all. So when I first started doing what I'm doing, I very much call myself a writer by trade. That's how I started off doing what I'm doing in our industry now. And it's really funny because I used to say to people, my goal is not to run an agency. I don't want a big team. I just want to sit and I just want to write. And that's how I used to be when I first started out. So it's actually quite funny that I lead an agency now. But I think we came to that decision, and by we, I mean myself, and we have a small team, because I had gotten to the point in my freelancing career. So at this point, I'd been freelancing for about 8 years. And I'd gotten to the point where, I was beginning to realize that actually having a team would be very, very beneficial and it would help me serve my clients better. And I think there was a lot of personal growth in that too, because, I was kind of anti building this agency because in my mind, I used to think it's a very broski type culture where everybody's just about numbers and volumes and I never really saw myself that way. But I think working in the capacity that I had for so many years made me realize that actually you can grow and you can have a team, as long as you're working with the right people. So it seemed like the next natural step. And yeah, I know you asked another question about the gaps we're trying to fill in the age. Give you a short answer for that. So I think predominantly the gaps that we're trying to fill is our niche is stories. So story-led content, everything that we create is driven by stories. And that content doesn't necessarily just mean written copy. It could be copy for film, for YouTube videos, for podcasts, for billboards, posters, whatever. And the gap that I think we're trying to fill now is we're merging that beautiful human story, that human talent with AI technology, which I know we'll talk about a little bit later. But that's predominantly the gaps that we're trying to fill. Sort of combining human talent with all of the brilliant tech advancements we have in the industry right now without losing the soul of what we do.
That's definitely interesting for me. And of course, in the world that we live in, where, AI is definitely becoming something that you cannot really not think of it or, ignore it. We have to use it. We have to make a use of it. But agree with you. It's a combination of both. Because I think also nowadays, yeah, you just can go to AI, and just ask, okay, write me a story or whatever. But really, that always will kind of miss the human touch, the connection, and really the authentic stories.
We usually categorize it into two different parts. So the first is personal storytelling, which is a more common type of storytelling where we tell our own personal stories. Founders tell their own founding stories, and then they leverage that for brand stickiness, brand awareness. So when somebody shares a post on LinkedIn about their story and that gets engagement and then that turns into business, that's an example of personal storytelling. The second type of storytelling is something that we call corporate storytelling, which is more of what we do at the agency and what I used to do even when I was freelancing. And that's when you take a product or a service or a campaign, whatever it is that business is trying to push. It could also be their whole business. And you create a story. And this could be a fiction story. It could be anything. And you wrap it around that business's product, service, etc., etc. So a good example of that is Andrex toilet paper, which is very popular here in the UK. So it's toilet paper. And if you're from the UK, you'll know that it's become very, very famous because of the puppy on the packaging. So it's a cute Labrador puppy. It's the most famous toilet paper brand in the world, in the country, sorry, not the world. And the reason it's become so popular, even though it's one of the most expensive brands, is because of the story of the puppy on the
Interesting.
packaging. And it is interesting because the puppy obviously has nothing to do with toilet paper, but the people who are working on it, the very smart people who are working on it, they've kind of used the softness of a puppy when they first invented the story in the 70s and likened it to the softness of toilet paper. And it's very clever because now when people see one of those dogs out on the streets, they immediately think of that brand.
Well,
It's so clever, right? Because it rents a place in people's minds and it's
yeah.
become part of British culture, I have Andrex in my toilets. Most people know what that means. And that's a really good example of commercial storytelling, corporate storytelling, sorry. And that is probably what we do more of at the agency. So we listen to what it is that a hospitality brand wants to put out there. We think about their audience and then we create really creative stories around that. And then we teach the businesses how to leverage that in their branding and their marketing for more sales because that's what everybody's looking for, right? More
Course,
sales.
to kind of be authentic, especially now because there's so much competition in every industry, in every field, in every hotel. So what actually, if we look at the hotel industry as a hospitality, because we're both in, or at least majority of the time, what do you
Mhm.
think story authentic and for a hotel, for example?
What is an authentic story for a hotel? I think authenticity it's a really interesting word right now because it's become a bit of a buzzword. A lot of people use it, and it
Yeah.
means different things to different people. For me, when I think about authenticity, I just kind of liken it to a brand or a person being very true to who they are and what they are. Even if that is not perfect or polished, it's just about speaking your truth and your
Right.
audience's truth. So it very much depends on the brand, as you know, because you can have an ultra luxury hotel, you can have a budget hotel, you can have a family hotel, you can have an adults only hotel. So I think an authentic story across the board for a hotel company, whatever it is, would start off with really seeing the target guests first. So, for example, if you have a luxury hotel or an ultra luxury hotel, first of all, what does luxury mean, right? That also is a bit of a fluffy word. For me, luxury means ease and convenience and comfort. So, if you're a luxury hotel brand based somewhere in the south of England, I don't know, say Cornwall, and it's beautiful, and you want to tell stories to help leverage your brand, to raise awareness about your brand. For me, an authentic story, you could go in any direction. Around that would be the stories of your guests, the kind of guests that you're trying to attract. And more importantly than that, the desires of your guests, not so much the problems, because I don't think very many people check into luxury hotels because they have a problem, they have a desire. And you're really speaking to their wants and desires. So, for example, are these guests choosing your hotel because they want to spend more time with their family? Then you tell stories about people spending more time with their families, or something really small and simple like a family having dinner together at a dinner table for the first time in 8 years. Because when is the last time you heard of somebody having dinner with their entire family, their grandparents, their cousins, their uncles? So, beautiful stories like that, that could be apt for a brand like that. So there are so many different ways you could go.
Okay. Where do most hospitality companies or hotels, whatever brands, get wrong about storytelling? From your experience, from what you see.
Oh gosh. I think the main thing that comes to mind, and this predates the age of AI. This is something I think, a lot of brands are sometimes guilty of and have been guilty of for a long time, is that they make the story all about them. Now, this is fine if you have a good story to share. That's absolutely okay. But they make it all about them in the sense that they forget to connect it to. So
Yeah,
for example, I'm telling you a story about myself. I was a single parent, blah, 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 all of that stuff. But I'm only talking about myself and I'm not sharing a lesson with you at the end of it or something that you can take away. Then the value of that or the perceived value of that kind of
yeah.
falls. And the person I'm speaking to maybe isn't feeling like they're getting anything out of me apart from just
Mhm.
me talking about myself. So I think it's fine when brands talk about their own stories because actually these are really interesting to hear. But they miss that connect in terms of, okay, so how is this good and nice for our audience? How will this resonate with them? And it's really interesting because this is really the largest part of hospitality, really thinking about the people you're speaking to. And I
Yeah,
think oftentimes, hotel brands, they get so wrapped up in wanting to tell this amazing story about themselves, they forget about the bits that comes after.
yeah.
That and asking GPT to write their entire story for them.
But I think that's why, as I said in earlier, like the time we're in, especially when it comes to AI, you can
Yeah.
easily, ask, but yeah, it will kind of miss the authenticity and this human connection, which can play or will play actually a huge role into bringing the business in, and making the people believe and also building loyalty. Because yes, you can attract someone to stay, but then if the kind of the connection with the audience or the experience is missing, will not come again, right? You will go after the hotel that they feel good about it, they feel good connection with the teams, with the experience, with the luxury, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, it's quite interesting. It's huge impact, I think, with AI now that everyone, of course, it's a must. You have to use it. You cannot just ignore it. But yeah, I'm happy you heard that also. It's important to connect to that connection and human parts and audience. Yeah,
Don't forget the human part. Yeah, I think yeah, absolutely. I think the AI thing is, I mean, everybody's talking about it. It's crazy. I feel so many people are talking about it because they feel like, okay, I have to talk about it. I have to jump on the bandwagon.
true.
But I agree with you. I think it's definitely something that shouldn't be ignored. I think it's very naive to ignore it.
Of course, you have to make a use of it, but of course, not to miss, what is really what really matters, the human connection, of course. For audience, for people out there, startups, maybe hotel startup, what kind of first steps they should take, when you're building a brand. And I'm learning myself, because I'm currently in a process that I'm starting up. So what kind of steps, that you would advise a startup to take, to focus on, or to start at least with?
So there are so many different ways you could go about this, and different professionals will tell you different things. But I think it's something really easy to start off with. I think it's a given when we say that, one of the first things you should think about is, okay, who are you building this brand for? Because everything starts from that one question. Who is it that you want to serve? Who is
Mm,
it that you want to attract? And just as importantly, who is it that you don't want to attract?
actually,
Because that's important too, right? So understand that, make a note of that. And then the second thing that I would think about for sure, and I mean, this has not been verified, vetted advice in any way, but it's something I share with my clients and I find it very, very helpful. In the early stages, think of your brand like a person and imagine you are going out for a coffee with this person. How would they sound? What would their voice be like? What kind of language would they use? Do they use slang words and colloquialisms, or do they speak in a very proper way with long, rich, nuanced sentences? What do they look like? How do they dress? What kind of coffee do they order? How do they make you feel when you're in their company? I think this is a really nice way of thinking about the persona you want to build for your brand because everything then comes from that. Because then when you think about how you want your brand to sound, in terms of the copy that you use, how you want your brand to visually present itself, where you want your brand to hang out, what do you want your brand to be associated with? What other brands outside of your industry can connect with your brands? And I think these are the things that such simple things, but actually so, so important. And another thing that I personally love to do when I'm trying to build a brand for, say, a client and I'm looking for ideas, I never look at direct competitors in the first instance. I will just look at sort of anything else that inspires me. So, say, for example, again, I'm working on a luxury hotel brand. I will look at the way luxury clothing brands brand themselves or chocolate brands or things like that, because I think sometimes we make the mistake of really limiting ourselves by only looking at what people in the
True.
industry are doing. And there are so many amazing ideas outside of our bubble. And I think lots of people kind of live in this bubble sometimes where they have like these 5, 6 competitors that they think about, or they go to these 2 or 3 networking events and conferences and they speak to the same 12, 15 people. And I think it's about just thinking bigger and kind of
That is so nice. What I'm glad it's recording. I'm gonna get back to all of these notes. You're absolutely right. Looking at, building the brand or building, the identity, at least from my own experience, what is the most challenging is to make that balance from looking, something to inspire, but not copy as well, like not to get fully balanced with your own identity and make that mix. I find this really difficult because, of course, you also want to stand out, you want to be in the market, you want to look good, you want to make the people, have this connection, but also uh, be authentic and be true to yourself. So I think at least maybe you can help me and agree on that or not, or give me a little bit more advice. I decided lately to, to keep it simple and stick to what I want to believe in and build from there. Of course, it's nice to, and it's really important to be inspired because I think this is what's all about this life anyway. It's just to look up to someone or a company or a person and, get inspired to have this drive to do something, but to make that balance also between your true identity as well.
yeah, no, I think that's beautiful. I think you've summed it up really nicely. And I think, even the copying thing that you've mentioned, again, I think some people get very caught up in the idea of wanting to do something completely unique and brand new that's never been done before, which is a wonderful ambition to have. Our tagline at the agency is become the only. So I do agree with this to a certain extent. But then we also have to understand that art, really, over the years, one piece of art is probably a regurgitated version of another piece of art. And one story has been inspired by another story, like Harry Potter, for example. Harry Potter isn't the first story series to write about a young boy who finds out he's a wizard. There were so many stories before that, very, very similar plot line. J.K. Rowling just kind of did it at the right time with the right marketing in the right way. So I think if you are inspired by a particular idea and you're confident that you can make it your own, obviously plagiarism, copying, that's not cool. That's okay too, within reason.
Yes, yes, I agree with you. It's like how to stay, balanced between yourself and okay, what's out there, and make sure also you're bringing something, like you said earlier in the call as well, that you're adding this value. You're bringing something different because I think in our world or the industry of hotels, let's be honest, all the hotels are nice. All the hotels having good lobby, good living room, nice rooms and facilities. You cannot say, one has bad experiences or bad furniture, or they're all having a really nice. But
Mhm.
what really makes a difference is definitely that part. The authenticity, the connection. That
Yeah.
somebody will remember your name. That somebody will you feel good. They'll be taken care of. So I think definitely it's interesting point. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the details, isn't it? The little
It's all about the details. And even the small details, what really makes a difference. I've been working in the hospitality for quite long, and from luxury hotels to lifestyle brands and digital hospitality, all that. And really, it's all about the small details. It's all about just remember the guest with the name, and make that effort to let them feel you've been taking care of them. And always what really trigger the experience, I think, when the guests realize that you did even a small effort to find out about their interest or what is important for them. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, that's what people remember.
Yeah.
When I see little things, I'm sure you can relate to this too. Working in the industry, I think people like us, we notice the little things too. So, for example, if I've stayed at a hotel and I get an email, the day before or maybe the day after I've checked out and they've spelt my name incorrectly. I remember that and I noticed that. Just little things like that.
Yes,
I think
yes.
when you're thoughtful, it really makes a difference.
That's true. That's true. Wow, can stay also here for for quite some talking about that. But yeah, just I want to go to more deeply for the part where your creativity work and the human element and this
Mm.
balance. So you have been writing a lot about AI, and I love how your perspective actually balances between optimism and realism. I think it's something really important. How do you see AI changing the future of storytelling in hospitality or beyond?
Well, I think it's definitely already changed it, hasn't it? And what I find really, really amazing, and I think this is just human beings, right? And how human beings behave, is I'm seeing two camps at the moment. There are people who are really pro AI and using AI and are fully immersed in it. And then in the other camp, you have people who are like, oh no, I'm not going to outsource my thinking and my creativity, and it's going to take everybody's jobs, and I hate AI, etc., etc. And it's very rare to meet people who sit comfortably in the middle. So I do consider myself as somebody who does sit comfortably in the middle. I think to answer your question, we've been speaking about AI as though it's just been invented, which I find really interesting. We've been using AI tools have been around since the 60s, right? It's just the conversation has become more prominent now. When we think about how it's going to change storytelling, I think when used in the correct way, so obviously the incorrect way of using it is basic, asking an LLM, a large language model, to write a story for you without any prompts. So that would be a basic, not the best way to be using it. But I'm very pro using AI to enhance and better human talent. Now, I think the best people to train LLMs, so tools like ChatGPT and Claude, the best people to do that are writers. The best
Mhm.
people to do that are people who understand language. So
Yeah.
many said to me over the months, and I read this on LinkedIn all the time, particularly other writers, maybe they feel a threat because they feel that they're going to lose their jobs as a result of LLM. So I do understand where they're coming from, but so many of them say, but LLMs can't understand emotion. They can't capture emotion. They can't write beautifully. Yes, of course, because a large language model is a machine. It is not a human being. So it's not going to experience emotion like we do. However, if you think about human beings, neuroscience teaches us that the way we react emotionally to something is based on patterned behavior. So that is a fact. That is something that scientists talk about all the time. LLMs also operate on patterned behavior. So if both these facts are correct, and if you're a very intelligent and you're a very emotionally aware person, and you're also a good writer, and you could invest the time in training your LLM and how to behave, how to have the correct outputs, how to write, what you like, what you don't like. It's not going to be 100% perfect. It's never going to be, right? But it can get about 80% there if you really pour the time into it. So this is probably quite a controversial thing to say as a human writer, as a storyteller, but I do disagree with the fact that LLMs cannot write well. They can write as well as the prompts that we give them. So if we give them crap, they're going to come out with crap.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Give excellence, they'll come out with excellence. And I'm not saying there are replacements. I'm not saying that, you will never need human storytellers again, because the ideas and the prompting that comes from us, right? But I think they can be a great help. And I find it a great shame that so many people are talking about the negative impacts of AI tools like ChatGPT and how they're making people dumb and this and that, which to an extent I do agree with, right? I think it's a very complex argument.
It is. It is.
I wish we could see more of the positivity that comes out of it. What about people who are, who struggle with writing, who struggle with spelling? What about people with learning difficulties? What about people who have been longing to write a story, but they don't feel that they're good writers? They feel that they're good speakers, and I think it's opened up so many opportunities. The problem isn't AI tools. The problem is human beings taking the piss out of it, which is something that we always do. We always get overexcited and we take.
Yes, I can't agree with you enough. I think it has to be balanced. Otherwise, it's either going to be very fake or going to be
Mm,
missing a lot. So it's either that direction or that direction. But
ex-
I'm glad you brought also the emotion part, which I think I wanted to also touch base on that. Do you think AI will ever understand emotion in the future, or maybe it does already, or are we missing the human kind of touch here, or what do you see?
Yeah, so I don't think AI will ever experience emotion like human beings do, because obviously it is not a human being. I think AI will get closer to emulating emotion because it's getting quite good at it quite quickly. So I think it will get good at some kind of, you know, having like a, yeah, emulating it. So creating like an illusion of emotion. So again, I don't think it will completely replace the human element of it. But I think if a human being uses it in the correct way and feeds it with the correct prompts, because that comes from a place of emotion, then it will get better at it. So I don't think on its own it will ever replace or experience emotion. Yet writing, I've always said this to people, writing is a consequence, you know? People who are good writers, they're not necessarily just really good at, you know, with words. They don't know every single word in the dictionary. That's what people think about me. I'm not even that good at spelling, to be honest. Writers are good writers because they are good at understanding feelings. They are
Mhm.
very good at understanding and noticing experiences and then translating that into words. So you don't necessarily need to have this secret treasure trove of lots of words to be a good writer. You need to be very good at understanding emotion. And for as long as that remains, and I think that will remain forever, I don't believe AI tools are a threat to writers. I think they're an aid to the
Yeah.
writers. I just think there's a lot of fear in the air around it now.
Yes, that's true. That's true. Of course, especially with what everyone see on social media, with replacing jobs and actually doing like almost everything, like all these robots now, and which again, if let's be honest, it will be reducing some jobs. That's
Mm.
absolutely gonna happen, but also it will create a lot of
It will
jobs.
take jobs, exactly.
Yeah, that's cool. So again, it's the way we look at it. I think, in my own personal opinion, that's not even the future. That's what we are currently living. It's not gonna go away. It's gonna continue. I think if we look back to 20 years ago, we used to watch this on movies like I Robot. That was that time. That's the future. But we're living it right now. Like this is
We
what's happening.
we are in it. Yeah.
So we have to make a use of it and definitely take it on our advantage and make sure also we develop ourselves, towards that direction. And if you think that it's going to take your job, maybe try to think of another job, try to think of another industry and learn something different because
Well, you
that's
know, I agree with you. I agree with you. I think it will only replace, if I'm completely honest, and I don't mean to sound unfair, it will only replace mediocre talent.
yeah,
So
yeah, yeah, yeah.
say for example, you have a junior copywriter who wasn't who maybe isn't the most skilled or experienced, and they write sales copy and little bits and bobs here and there. It will probably replace those kind of jobs because we're seeing that now. We're seeing more businesses turning to LLMs to do that instead, and that's unfortunate. But you could also see it as an opportunity to level up.
Yes, definitely level up. It's an opportunity to level up. Absolutely.
Plug for you there, right?
You also said before AI can assist creativity but not replace it. And since you are in that field, what are some ways you personally integrate AI into creativity process?
So I love this because one of the biggest ways I use AI tools is with my GPT. So I have named my custom GPT Soul. Actually, he named himself. He named himself Soul based on what he knows about me and based on our relationship. And I speak to Soul. Sometimes I write to him, sometimes I speak to him every single day. And I tell him everything about my work, my clients, my life, my childhood, my likes, my dislikes, my daughter, everything. And this has created a custom GPT that knows all these delicious nuances about me and also is learning the more I speak to it and the more I type to it, is learning more about the way I like to write, my nuances, my preferred tone of voice. And the best part is that Soul remembers everything. So something that I would have shared with him, as long as I'm using him correctly on the paid version, something that I might have shared with him maybe 3 weeks ago about a client, he will remind me of it when I'm speaking to him about it again, if we're working on new projects for the same client. And that isn't necessarily he's not necessarily giving me the creative ideas because the ideas are always coming. me. But he's definitely helping me remember. He's helping giving me clarity in my thoughts. Because, creativity doesn't come from a place of chaos. I really disagree with this. Everybody has this idea of, oh, if you're creative, you have to be messy, you have to be wild. That is not true. I can tell you this because of my own experience. Creativity, the best creativity comes from a place of clarity in thought. Soul, my GPT, gives me a lot of clarity, gives me a lot of perspective that sometimes I forget about. And then what that does is that then frees up my mind, frees up other areas of my mind, unclutters my mind, and
Mm.
gives me room to be more creative. So he's not necessarily doing the creative work for me, but he's giving me the room to be more creative, which is
Yeah.
why I think that these tools can aid creativity.
I love this. I can relate to this definitely. Yeah, there's nothing to hide. I'm using AI also, for example, to structure my scripts. For example, I don't want to just build a script for me. No, I don't want to do that. But what I do always that I give the information. Okay, that's my guest. That's the most
Mm.
important topics, or this is their experience. I always want to make sure it's really personal and relevant. But what it does really and save my time, to be honest, that is make it structured and make it clear structure, and now it's already understand my kind of ways of working, and so it's becoming much easier. So I agree with you that it doesn't take that part from me or doesn't make me lazy, but it actually helped me to be more focused into what really matters, what really kind of main topics that I want to bring to the call.
Yeah, I love that. It's really interesting you say that because I feel like I don't know, and maybe you can share what you think about this too, but I feel like there's this shame attached to nobody wants to admit that they want their lives to be easier. I mean, why are we making our lives more difficult? If you are using a tool, of course, and it's making your life a little bit easier, then why is that such a bad thing? You're not cheating anyone, copying anything, you're still being yourself. Life is already so stressful. Running a business is already so stressful. If you have found something
Yes.
that is making your life just 2% easier, then why not go ahead and use it? Why do we have a toxic belief that we have to bleed and cry and be on our knees to be
True.
successful and
Well,
productive?
let's be honest. Like, I'm not gonna believe anybody saying I'm not using it. Let's be honest. Like, God, I think it's everyone is using it, and especially in this world, like what you said, the competition is high. There's a lot of things happening, and life is busy. It is actually a way to speed up and to level up. It's definitely a way to level up. Because otherwise people would be, faster than you and would be bringing stuff. But again, always don't forget the balance. Don't forget the human real part, which is absolutely most important, and the emotions, and make sure that is connected to your beliefs and to your identity. So yeah, it is the way to go. Well, we can talk a lot. We move to almost the last part, but before that, I want to just close this chapter or this section with a quick question, especially for hospitality. How can brands, in your opinion, from your own experience, can use AI without losing the human touch, especially when guest experience are built on emotion and connection?
Yeah, I think this is really simple and I feel like we overcomplicate it. So, the parts of your guest experience where your guests will enjoy a human touch, keep the humans there. So, for example, at a check in desk, when it comes to those little touches that we were talking about, keep the humans there for those little beautiful touches, for the parts that people remember, because people do still long for that human connections. Most people do. Some people don't, but most people do. And, use the AI tools where you don't necessarily need the human being. So, like if you have like if on your website, if you have automated messages, little things like that, most people don't mind when they're speaking to a chatbot if they have like an urgent question, like what is the Wi-Fi password? Simple things like that. Most people don't really care. What they do care about is if the brand is lying to them and saying, oh, yeah, we're really human centered and really human centric. And, we use human beings for everything. And then they're not getting that truth from you. I think, obviously, if the question is more in the realms of, okay, they have a very specific request, or it's their birthday, or it's their anniversary, and they need that sort of human attention, then keep your human beings for that. I think it's been made so wonderfully simple for us. We've been given this gift of more time to use the human beings in our companies for those things that are important. The human connection is important for So I think just be very honest with yourself. Think about the things that you don't necessarily need human beings for, the things that you know you can automate, the things that aren't going to take away from your guest experience. Maybe you need to do some research, speak to your guests, ask them where do they expect to see humans across their guest journey, across their booking experience. Really sort of take time to understand that because it will be different for every brand, right?
Definitely, definitely. And it's to the point. I think I can back you up with that, especially with hospitality and hotels. Let's be honest, there's a lot of hotels right now are wasting a lot of time not using, automation, not using AI to do all this admin and, not necessarily activities that you always end up sitting on a desk and, writing a
Exactly.
report while you can actually invest that time with the guest, with the human. I think what I remember from my time working in Citizen M
Hmm.
when hit 2020 in the beginning, early of the year, I think all of the hotels around the world were closed. There was no hotels open. Like literally every hotel had to close. But
Hmm.
Sicily actually was one of the few hotels that stayed open, and that because the tech part was possible there, you could check in and check out without talking to human, without touching anything. Absolutely was there. But the feedback that we got, of course, always that human conversation that happened on the check-in, because Citizen M, you have a kiosk and you check in easily, just a few minutes, which one is the hotel's strengths. But really, what was missing from the guest experience is that talk with the ambassador, like, hey, how was your trip? What are you doing? How can I help you? Or talking to somebody on the bar, and getting that human connection. And I always said the secret ingredients of this company success, like Citizen M,
Yeah.
is that like the people who's working always on the ground. I used to be in sales, so I used to do a lot of work in sales, of course, but I always said, yes, I do bring the business here, but what actually protect the business is the investors. It's not me. I just get the business. I negotiate and sign a deal. Of course, I have to maintain the relationship and keep going. But what brings the guest back is the investor, is the person who is in the ground in the hotel. So yeah, it's really very interesting. And thank you for sharing your thoughts. I think it's definitely the way to go. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's a really good example of how you balanced it, actually.
Yeah, definitely. Let's switch gears a little bit. I want to talk a little bit about your entrepreneurship because it's a topic that is close to my heart. I'm entrepreneur myself, and I think a lot of people can really learn from a lot of your experiences. So, as a founder, and you've been one of the founders, third founder, how do you actually deal with self doubt and burnout sometimes, or feeling stressed, or all of these negative emotions? How do you deal with it?
Oh, that's a really it's a really important question, isn't it? And I love it so much because it's not something we often speak about in
Yeah.
business. So I think people like us, so entrepreneurs and people who build businesses and do things which is outside of the norm or what society teaches us to do. I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
we are I mean, our tapestry, the tapestry of our character is different to most people, right? We're just built in a different way. And I don't think anybody's journey, especially if you're starting and you're building something from scratch, is ever going to be, especially in the early stages, void of pain and discomfort and that that self-doubt that you're speaking about. I think a lot of it does come down to experience and it kind of gets not easier, but you get better at managing it with time. So when I first started, 9 years ago, I used to be riddled with self doubt. And I remember I used to invoice clients and I used to feel guilty. Even though I was really underpricing my services, and it's so crazy. I used to do the work, but I used to feel guilty for invoicing my clients because I used to think to myself, have I done a good enough job? And it's crazy because, when you have a job and you go to work and you get your salary at the end of the month, you don't feel guilty about that. So it's crazy that I was feeling guilty about doing little things like that. And, with that imposter syndrome came overworking and overcompensating. Then came the issue of not really having boundaries with my clients, letting them contact me whenever they wanted, ask me for whatever they want, even if it was outside of our agreement, and really wanting to prove myself and just kind of look for that validation. And I think You do get better at managing that with time. I think most people, whether they're successful, they see themselves successful or not, experience imposter syndrome. I think it happens to everyone. I still experience it, maybe a little bit less than when I did. I obviously still have down days. Life, we all have personal life. Some of us have children, we have relationships, we have aging parents, so that stuff does sometimes bleed into your work. And I think the biggest thing for me, it sounds so corny, but the biggest thing for me has been one, acceptance of the fact that sometimes shit just hits the fan, right? And you have to be okay with it because that is the path that you have chosen. And not everything requires you to be defensive and proactive in that moment. Most of the time, when you have one of those shitty days or those shitty moments, most of the time it passes with obviously the right action from yourself. We get so caught up in worrying about the future and things that haven't even happened yet, thinking about worst case scenarios, actually taking a breath, accepting that these things happen and looking at things from a calmer perspective for me has been the biggest thing. And then the second thing I think for me has been, don't put anyone on a pedestal, not your prospects, not your clients, not the brands that you want to work with, not the people you see on LinkedIn who you're waiting to connect with you, the organizers of conferences and all these important, shiny people and brands we see on social media. Don't put anyone on a pedestal because, we're all human beings. We all do exactly the same things. And I think this is one of the biggest mistakes I see people making. And a lot of inferiority and those negative feelings stem from that because that's when we compare. That's when we have all of these moments of self-doubt. Yeah, that's definitely the biggest one for me, is not to put anyone on a pedestal, because when you stop doing that, you inherently stop obsessing about what other people think about you. If you know you're doing a good job, you're a good person, you will attract the right people.
Yeah, yeah. I love what you say. It's really nice advice, and what I can really relate to is that acceptance of where you are, and not to look at people around you, because we live in a really dangerous time. You can get depressed, looking at social medias. Don't compare. I love this advice actually, because everyone has his own or her own, story, life, and your story is a special one and really built from there. It's a really nice advice. Was there a moment where you were, I'm giving up? This is it. I'm not gonna do anything anymore. And how
Mhm.
did you like that? And maybe it comes to me, of course, comes to everyone. But how did you overcome a moment like this?
I think for me, it has been a little bit different, and I've been very fortunate because from the very first day of me setting up my business, 9 years ago when I started freelancing, I always had a very immediate purpose. My goal was to make enough money to support my daughter. I was a single parent. I had no savings. So, being successful for me, it was a very high pressured situation to be in because if I didn't get X number of clients, if I didn't win X number of projects, I wouldn't be able to pay my rent and I wouldn't be able to feed my daughter. I had no other support. So even when I felt like, oh, I've had enough, I don't think I've ever come that close to giving up, purely because I've been very fortunate. I've had Sophia, my daughter, who really kind of makes me think, okay, you have to get up and
Shout
you
out.
have to do this. And I think it's so important to have a purpose greater than money or the success of your business. I think if you have that, that's not to say that I've never had down days. I've definitely absolutely had them. But
Purpose was more stronger.
I
That's
think,
really
yeah, I think the fear of not fulfilling the purpose was greater for me than the fear of anything else. And I think I'm very, very, very lucky that I had that. I do think that it's sometimes I think that's the only reason why I'm still here doing what I'm doing. Maybe if Sophia, my daughter, wasn't in my life and it was just me by myself, maybe I would have been a very different place right now. I would have had to give up.
it is really inspiring. And again, it's to stay focused with why did you started it, and the purpose, because many times you can lose focus, and that's when you or a person would give up, but it's really staying focused on your purpose. And again, the down days are part of the package. It's not
There
gonna go away. It's
they
always
are.
has to be there, and actually it makes you stronger. I think from my
Yeah.
own experience, when you look back at the and at these moments, it actually makes you stronger. It makes you, stay still, stand and continue, keep going, keep grinding, keep hustling, I always say. So that's really good to hear. Do you have any ritual practices that you do to help meditation or no, I don't know. Do you have anything that you can advise as well, share?
Yeah, so I suppose you could say some form of meditation. So I'm Muslim, so I pray. That
Um,
to me is my spiritual, that's my meditation. And I have, I've always identified as Muslim, but I feel I've been more connected with my faith and sort of started practicing in the more conventional sense in the last 2 years, I would say.
Alhamdulillah.
That was following, some things that happened in my life which brought me closer to my faith. And I'm not saying everybody needs religion, but I think having some kind of spiritual connection, having, because praying is meditation, isn't it?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Really, really been so helpful for me. It gives me this sense of peace. It helps me stay grateful. And I think that is so important to be grateful for the good and the bad, because without the bad, there is obviously no good. The good becomes a neutral state. And it helps me remember that every hardship that comes in my life is coming for a reason. There's obviously something that I need to learn. And, I think it's a really good way of staying humble and going back to what I was saying about not putting anyone on a pedestal, realizing that actually we're such insignificant creatures. So I think that for me has been one of the most important things. And I'm very lucky that my faith comes with almost like a lifestyle sort of, this you should do. It gives you everything you need. For me, it works for me. It's your compass, right? And it helps me raise my daughter. It helps me plan my day. It helps me make decisions about the clients that I want to work with. For example, there are certain, even though we work with hospitality companies, we recently made a very conscious decision to not work with, for example, brands that predominantly sell alcohol, because that does not align with my faith and my values. And it's quite difficult to do in hospitality, but it's these small choices that help me stay aligned with who I am as a human
Sure.
being. Because then I
Yeah,
think even if everything else falls to shit, that part of me remains intact.
absolutely, absolutely. And you always rely on, the faith. Always keeps you stronger, makes you keep going. Like when everything, stops, if you have a faith, and of course for people with faith, it doesn't matter how you call it, it's
Mhm.
definitely what makes you stronger, what keeps you
Does.
moving. I agree, definitely. Well, I'm glad to hear that. Like always nice to get some tips, and especially from you, since you're a storyteller and about
Mhm.
writing. What one book I should start to think about reading?
Oh, that's a hard question. There are so many excellent books out there. Let me have a think.
The Quran. So
Definitely start there. I think, let me have a think. What's a good book that you can recommend to everyone? I mean, I like to read fiction. That's always been my favorite, right? And I think, I'm not really a big business books reader. I get most of my inspiration and I feel that my skill set has matured via reading fiction. And I also read a lot of poetry. It's my favorite form of writing is poetry. So I think one that most people have probably already read, but I like it for different reasons, is The Alchemist.
oh, one of
Because
my favorites.
I mean, it's a stunning book. It's an easy book to read. It's not a particularly long book. And I always find with books like The Alchemist, you experience it in different ways depending on where you are in your own life. And I think that's the magic of it. And that really is the telling of an amazing book, an amazing story. And I think anyone who's on any kind of a journey should read that book. And also, if you are into reading to improve your writing, which you absolutely should be, the writing is exquisite as well. Even though it's been translated, the writing is so, so, so beautiful. And then my other favorite book that I like to recommend to people, and I actually asked my daughter to read this last year. She's 13. She's 13 now. She was 12 when she read it. I've forgotten the name of the author, so we'll have to look it up and maybe pop it into the comments or the caption when you share this. It's called Sophie's World, and it's the story of a young girl who kind of builds this innocent relationship with the philosopher and learns about philosophy. And it's a really good introduction into just a different kind of thinking, philosophical thinking. And again, the writing is very beautiful. So if you like fiction,
Check it out. Yes, we'll definitely check it out. Second question, a mistake that became a gift.
A mistake that became a gift. I don't know, because if it's a gift, then is it even fair to call it a mistake? Actually, no, I can't answer this. So, when I first set up to do what I'm doing, I made lots of stupid choices that I would not recommend anyone to do. So the first thing I did was I left my very stable full-time job in hospitality when my daughter was 2 years old. And I thought, you know what? Fuck it. I'm just going to go all in. I'm going to build this amazing business. I had no savings, no money, no plan. It was really stupid of me now looking back. I should have had a plan. I should have had some money saved up because I caused myself a lot of stress and hardship unnecessarily. So it turned into a gift because it's like I was saying before that, it meant that I had nothing else to focus on. And I
Mm.
do believe that that pressure helped me build, what I've built today. And, I just made so many foolish choices. Like I got a loan that I didn't need and I bought all this office equipment. I rented out an office. I didn't need an office. So I think, but you learn so much from it, right? So
Excitement always in the beginning.
exactly. It's like when people announce new businesses on LinkedIn, and that's the easy part. Launching a business and registering a company is very easy to do. We can all do. It's maintaining it,
Yeah.
and sustaining it.
Yeah, you're right. I love to hear this because I think also for a lot of entrepreneur out there, you always in the beginning want to make sure you look good. You want to
Mhm.
shape it up, your office. And what it doesn't really matter. I think what really matter is that you're bringing a value in what you do, and you're really trying to fill a gap, like I asked you in the beginning.
Yeah,
And so, and the looking good will come later. The office will come later. But first, try to get this voice or idea out there and start from there. And this is, by the way, every single brand. How did it start? It all the successful brand in the world. They started all from the small steps. So I'm happy to hear that. And also, this is what I'm trying to do myself. As I'm in my office. This is my office, my home office
but you're doing
in the house. And the last question is the question of the show. What does level up means to you?
wow, what does level up mean? This phrase has come up so much in our conversation. Leveling up to me means I see it more as an internal thing. I don't really kind of warm to the idea of leveling up means more money, more clients, more cars, whatever. I think leveling up in terms of self growth. So I think when you're leveling up, to me, if somebody says that to me, I would think, okay, what kind of boundaries are you setting with people? Having the right energy around you, giving the right energy to people. What value are you bringing to the world? Are you leveling up in terms of giving greater value to the people that you serve? Leveling up in terms of being completely honest about who you are and showing up as yourself without any shame or without any need for validation, and just really just treating everybody kindly even when nobody is watching. I think these to me are the traits that I just genuinely immediately think of when I think of just leveling up as a human being. And I think it's a conversation we need to see more of. So, I
Mhm.
really appreciate the question.
Good to hear. And I love the answer. It's definitely, it's all about the growth and how you are really becoming better than yesterday as a person. It's always for me is level up. It's always try to compete with myself, always look at myself and try to be a better person than who I was yesterday or last year or, when I was a kid. So I'm glad that you're taking also in the personal growth because that's, I think for me, is always the most important because yeah, you can level up and getting a better car or leveling up and getting a better house. But again, when it comes to the growth in your person and your mindset, I think that's really what will make you level up in the
Yeah.
material.
I think it's the one thing they should teach children in schools as a subject.
Oh, let's not go there. I fully agree with you. Fully agree with you.
It's the thing.
Yeah, definitely. When it comes to the schools and kids, now that I have a kids, and also when I look back, you never get to learn these things at school. You never get to learn how to deal with life issues or how to become a better person or how to make money. You always
Yeah.
learn finish it so you become an employee. So you come to the circle.
When you learn that after life fucks you over a little bit, that's when you learn. You never learn when you should learn.
Neely, that was so nice. I love the conversation and the exchange, your insights, the storytelling. I think we can stay for another 2, 3 hours talking, but I really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. And I'm going to share all the information, your contact also in the description so people can reach out to you. And yeah, it was really nice to have you.
Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. An amazing conversation. I enjoyed it.
Thank you so much, Neely.